performance-based system. You guys would say the wisdom in the world would say God would be monumentally more happy with a guy like me preaching on Sunday than with somebody who was drunk, sitting in New Orleans. That's not true.
No. Or even a farmer.
Even a farmer.
You beat the farmer.
Right.
Because you're preaching.
I mean, God is as filled with as much joy towards every human, no matter what they're doing. Now, He's not happy if the person's suffering at the hands of sin and death. He's not happy that they're not experiencing life. Okay, so to that degree, you could say that God's happy that someone's experiencing His life, but that doesn't mean He's more happy with them as a person. Do you see what I'm saying? And we tend to make it He's happier with us as a person. God's happy with all people in equal amounts. So I hate to break it to you. If you thought you were more acceptable to God than the guy next to you, you're wrong. If you thought God liked you better because you gave more money than the other guy, you're wrong. And see, what we don't realize is underneath it all, I think I said this in the Bible study, if we stripped it all down and took it all away, underneath it all any of us want, really, is to experience a life of peace, love, joy, kindness, meekness, patience. That's all that any of us want underneath it all. Everything we do is to actually have that.
Yes.
The thing that we've gotten twisted is that we think the key to having that is found in the world, in what we see going on in our lives. Right? So we look to the flesh to have peace and love and joy and kindness. We look to the world to have peace and love and joy and kindness. And that's why the cup of the New Testament is so powerful, because it comes and says, listen, guys, this peace, this love, this joy, this patience, this thing you're desiring more than anything, listen, man, it's not found in the world or in your flesh. You can never get it from there. But guess what it is found in? My Spirit. And then He reveals His Spirit in the person of Jesus. And you start feeding on that. And then you find the peace and the love and the joy that you always wanted. But you find it in the Spirit. So whenever we feel stressed out, we tend to think it's our circumstances. Right, but it's not. It's that the circumstances are trying to convince us we're separated from life.
Or that we're not as we ought to be.
Right. Now the thing is the world can never convince us that we're not separated from life. And so the more we look to that to be changed for peace, the more we're going to find ourselves not experiencing peace. But when we can realize the cup of the New Testament, when we feel stressed or pressed, what will happen is our hearts will instinctively go to God. Instead of our hearts thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I got to do this, I got to do that. You'll instinctively go to God, and you'll start talking to God about the pressure that you feel. Then you'll start talking to God about how He died away death. You'll start talking to God about how He raised up your life and sat you above every principality and power in this world. That just means our life is sat above every system of governance that exists in this world. There's no system of governance in this world that can hold our life down anymore. And see, when you realize that, you start to feed on that instinctively. And that will bring you peace in the middle of whatever stress you feel. Apart from the circumstances. Jesus had peace in the boat while the storm was going on. He didn't say in His heart, if I can quiet this storm, then I can have peace. He was sleeping. You see? But those guys, they thought their life was hid in the world. And so they were stressed out. Right? And so that's what the blood of the cup of the New Testament is that it teaches us that our life, God has come and taken our life out of the world and He's hid it in Himself. That's what it means to be dead to sin and alive to God. What is the wages of sin? Death. So when it says to consider yourself dead to sin, you could really say it this way: consider yourself dead to the wages of sin. Death.
Amen.
And consider yourself alive to God. That word God there doesn't mean singular like just Father. Consider yourself alive to the Godhead and His life. You see, what happens then is he goes into how if you consider yourself alive to sin, meaning you act as if death is reigning over you, then that death will take your body captive and it will work its fruit in your members. You become a slave to sin and death. But when you can see that you're alive to the life of God, that takes your members captive. And it makes you a slave to the fruit of God's life. Meaning that you'll only ever find love coming out of you. Because the fruit of an eternal life is love. You'll only ever find yourself filled with peace because the fruit of a life that can't end is peace. You'll only find yourself at rest because the fruit of a life that can't be corrupted is rest. You see?
Yeah.
And that's what God's trying to captivate us with. If we can just see this word of life, and this word of life can become the meditation of our heart, we just walk around daydreaming about the word of life, man, that'll do something to you. It'll do something to you. It'll do something to the way you view everything going on in your life. And you'll find yourself thinking like Paul, where he called all his affliction light. This light affliction, he said. How many of us, if we read up Paul's tribulation, would call it light? But Paul called it light.
Yeah.
And he wasn't using his willpower.
Right.
And he's not telling us to use our willpower. He's saying, something's happened to me. I was crucified with Christ. The old man is dead. I'm now divorced from sin and death. Death no longer has any power over me through the Spirit of life. And what he's saying is that did something to me, where I realized the life I have now in this mortal body is that life that's been from the beginning, and it can't die. And what he's saying there is that caused me to look on all my affliction, and it caused my heart to count it as petit, of little consequence.
Yes.
This affliction that's happening to me, the world would say it's great, but in light of that eternal life that I have in this mortal body, that I know can't die, that affliction shrinks.
Yes.
It goes from being real big and magnified to being shrunk down to nothing.
That's a key point, because oftentimes when I read that, I thought he was comparing his affliction to the suffering that Christ had suffered on the cross.
Yeah.
And that's that's a huge distinction, because if you're all wrapped up in that, then you get all afoul with that one.
Oh, you thought he was saying in light of Christ's suffering, my
Yes,
affliction is
my
small.
affliction's small.
Right. No,
Yeah.
that'll make you suffer.
That'll make you suffer.
In fact, Christ was thinking his affliction was light.
Yeah.